Welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting for Tuesday, August 21st. As we always do, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is a vote to change the manager to Ryan Forbes for Wine and More, 90 Providence Highway. You here? Come on up. Why don't you just introduce yourself? Yep.
My name's Ryan Forbes. I'm the new manager at the Wine and More in Walpole.
Great.
I live down in Foxborough, so relatively local.
Yep.
Which is kind of nice.
That's pretty local.
It's pretty local. It's not right here. But I'm moving from the Wines and More in Mansfield. So
Okay.
I have experience in the exact store that I'm moving to, just in a different town.
Great.
It's just more of a little management shakeup with some new eyes, like stores will do from time to time, is the reason for it.
Great.
The former manager is still within the company, working at Wines and More in Mansfield.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Brian?
No.
Cindy, you happy with all the paper? I'm sorry, David.
Were you the manager in Mansfield as well?
That's correct.
All right.
Cindy, you're happy with all the paperwork?
Everything's in order, yeah?
I'll make a motion to approve the change of manager to Ryan Forbes for Wines and More, 90 Providence Highway.
I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Good luck.
Thank you, sir. You guys
Thank
have a
you.
great day.
Next up is the hearing for installation of one new pole on Short Street.
This is the one, we're gonna ask you to continue this hearing.
Okay.
Because there's some paperwork that, the town engineer has not received at this point in time, so we're putting it off. I'm asking you to continue it to September 18th at,
Are we opening it and continuing it, or just continuing it? Because we advertised it, right?
No, you don't get,
Oh,
it doesn't get
we didn't
advertised. I
have it.
notified the butters,
All
so I
right.
had to put it on here in case any butter showed up.
Okay, so just continue it then, right?
Yeah.
Is there anybody here who's in a butter for the
Because it's not an
telephone
official
pole?
hearing.
Okay.
Guess so.
Nope.
So Cindy, it's not an official hearing, it was just a
It's not,
courtesy.
no, it's not like a public hearing, they just
Okay.
call it a hearing.
All right, I'll make a motion to continue the hearing till September 18th, 2018 at 8:20 p.m.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Next up, vote request of Pulte Homes of New England LLC for off-site improvements on East Street, School Street, Plain Street.
I believe Pulte is going to come. I can give an update, and what would you like to wait till 7:30?
We can wait till 7:30 if we think
Okay.
somebody's coming. We're
Yeah,
moving along quickly.
sure.
So the public hearing, we have to wait till 7:40, okay? Should we do the new business?
I'll make a motion.
We do have, I don't know if anybody's here for open forum, but we have it scheduled for 8, so we're gonna wait till 8 o'clock, just because that's what people are gonna be expecting, so. Nancy?
I'll make a motion to award bid contract 2019-02 to LaRusso Corp.
Do you have any background?
No, we were pleased with the bids that were received in, and recommend favorable action to award the contract to Corp.
Any questions for Jim?
I do have a
Go right ahead, Ian.
And this, what the material is for what particular purpose?
This
Or
is
it
for
just
the coal patch throughout town for the pickup at the plant, basically for the DPW to go out and pick it up with the trucks and patch the potholes and wherever else needs to be repaired.
Okay, so it's for pothole repair materials only?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Nancy?
No.
Did you already make a motion? Sorry, I'm not paying attention. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion to award the one-day all-alcohol beverage to Knights of Columbus for August 26, 2018 for, first birthday party.
Sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I'll make a motion for the one-day all-alcohol beverages at the Knights of Columbus for August 25th for a bridal shower.
Did you get invited?
I didn't.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And I will make a motion for a one-day entertainment permit for DJ at Fox Hunt Trail, Longwood Cul-de-sac.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I will make a motion for the use of Adams Farm for the Great Grilled Cheese Festival on October 21st.
I'll second that. Any discussion?
Sounds delicious.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 I should have a nice picture here. It does look delicious. I'm
Oh, and
hungry,
it's,
so-
well, one thing about it, though, it is a nonprofit and it is a fundraiser.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yes.
Table.
For Chef's Table Foundation.
Stable.
So there's gonna be grilled
Just
cheeses,
read that.
chips, drinks, ice cream, food, clown act, face painting, balloons, raffles, and it is a scholarship for the Chef's Table Foundation.
Sounds like fun.
It does, but, and I know we took the vote on this, but Jim, I know the Friends of Adam Farm or the Adams Farm Committee, do they ever come in here to give us a report? I know we had
They're scheduled
discussed
to come
this.
in
Coming in
on
September
September
18th.
20, yeah, 18th, sorry.
September 18th?
Yeah.
Great.
He's been away, so it's been hard to get him in.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, you did?
Then I started talking.
Okay, so we have a motion to second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. I will make a motion. Wait, let me see. Okay, I'll make. Oh, okay, thanks. This is a weird one, but it's a request. Alright. I'll make a motion to approve the request to use town common on September 22nd, 2018 for the United Nations Day of Peace, and the use of electrical outlets, a loudspeaker, to have drums, simple refreshments, and police assistance.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I will make a motion to close the 2018 fall town warrant.
I'll second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Want to do the consent agenda?
Should we save number one? Or should we save it when he's here?
No, we can do it.
Okay. These items will be voted as one item. They're all gifts to the COA, Council on Aging. James and Nancy O'Neill in the amount of $10,000. Cheryl and Michael Karen. George and Philippa Sabatini. And the Friends of Walpole Elders, $200,000.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? I would just say thanks to people who are donating money for the new Council on Aging building and for the programs. The building's gonna be great. It's scheduled to open sometime in the December timeframe, early January. It's coming along really well. It's on South Street on a former Superfund site, and it's right next to the police station, which is now open and is great. So we have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Town Administrator update.
Sure, we have a couple of things here. The Summer Street MBTA crossing. I've heard some rumors over the last few days or so of no gates being installed at that location. Actually heard one as late as 5:30 this afternoon from Representative Dooley. He was told by MassDOT that there was no gates being installed there. I went back and I actually brought it with me in case someone showed up tonight. The plans that were approved and on file with the town engineer and our office shows gates, not only vehicle gates, but pedestrian gates being installed there. So I'm not really sure where Sean had heard that. I reached out to him, I haven't heard back. But the other thing I had heard was that the pilot is proposed to be moved up to this September. I haven't heard anything on that. They haven't reached out and talked to us at all about it. From what I understand, they haven't even done the crossing improvements here in the center yet. So I don't see how that could happen. It would be moved up a year without letting us or our representatives know. But I just more or less wanted to get out. And I also sent in a request for the MassDOT to reconsider reducing the speed limit from Foxborough to here to 15 miles an hour. Chief Carmichael sent Officer Foley out to do a traffic study out in that area, and I've included the report for you. But basically, we just don't really see how it's possible to safely drive 40 miles an hour, especially in between those crossings right there. So I'm pushing hard for that, and we're still working with council in the various matters. So.
I was actually on the tracks today because my son was at, the other day he said, oh, he went to a friend's house, and we were driving that way. I said, oh yeah, I walked on the tracks over there. And I'm like, okay. So I said, show me where you go from Cumberland Farms, where the kids go, right? So, I mean, we really need to figure out how we're gonna discourage these kids from doing that. It's, especially coming right out of where Cumberland Farms is, there's sort of a turn there. You don't see the whole track. When you get down a little, you can see both ways for about a mile, but right there, it's kind of scary. I also have a question. The tracks have not been replaced yet, have they?
It's my understanding that some of the tracks in South Walpole near the Shoefelt area have been replaced. I don't know about if they have been up near Oak Street there.
So when I was on the tracks, there are two track, I don't know how they do this, but there are two tracks on the side of this current setup railroad. They're just two rails, and there's no seams in them. They just go for the whole. I think, aren't those the ones that are supposed to be put in place at some point?
Let me check. I don't really know a lot about tracks. I'm learning more as we go along.
But I wonder, I mean, I wonder how long it takes to do that. It looks like there's new stone out there, but not.
Yeah, and just the other day on the MassGov site, MassDOT's looking for a project manager for a railroad project.
Yeah, so.
And let me just jump in too, just so people, especially on TV and even here, we get very little response from the MBTA and Mass DOT. We've had meetings, tried to have meetings. Recently, you sent a letter asking, a whole series of questions, where they basically made it clear that they didn't really want to discuss it anymore. They feel like they've given us all the notice they're going to give us. And this board has said many times over the last 2 years that we're very concerned, especially about the safety and security, especially the kids. And I know that there was an issue at the game last week where the train, even coming through at whatever it was, 15 miles an hour, there's no gates right now, but the lights didn't turn on. So literally the train went through without anyone really knowing it was coming unless they saw it, which I think is extremely dangerous. Police officers responded, and they had to stop Walpole police officers. Yep. No MassDOT or no MBTA police were there. They didn't even know about it until Chief Carmichael reached out to me. I reached out to them, and they resolved the issue, but there was no contact information in case of emergency. So. Frustrating. So we are very concerned about the whole train thing, and we'll open it up for open forum in a little bit later.
Yeah.
So.
And when are the the gates going back? School starts next week.
I'll follow up with that today. I was more concerned, are the gates actually being there? And that's what I was following up on this afternoon.
The gates need to be there, and school starts next week.
Yeah.
We should also make sure that the gates are really going in for the pilot. I wonder if they were doing a bait and switch where they showed a design with the gates, but that's really for full train service. So I'm very leery of anything to do with the MBTA at this stage.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the rehab at Summer Street. The plans are dated July 25th. So, and they show.
No, I remember seeing the plans, and they do show gates. In fact, on multiple pages, it shows that intersection of the gates. So.
They've done nothing but demonstrate their autonomy and their lack of any kind of compromise for safety at all. Just to follow up on what David was saying about the access to the children for path, is there no fencing or any sort of barriers or perimeter?
There's no fence over there.
Right now, there's nothing. They've agreed to put fencing along Oak, Spring, originally not shoe felt, but now they've said they'll include shoe felt on that.
Is that the chain link fence that they were talking about to put up, or was that more of a barrier between the houses, the adjacent houses?
I believe it's a chain link barrier, chain link fence.
I guess it won't matter as long as it's a barrier for the kids.
All right, thanks, Jim.
Okay. DPW Director and Community Planning Director. We have received a bunch of resumes in for both positions, which is good, very qualified candidates for both positions. I asked Patrick to start to begin interviews. Since we hired a search firm to help us with the Community Planning Director, I'm going to also enlist his help. I asked Maggie and David Norton to sit in on the first round of interviews. If one or two members of the board would like to sit in, you're more than welcome to also. As far as the DPW Director, I have reached out to Chief Carmichael, Chief Bailey, Marilyn, Jody, Patrick, and Val to do the first round of interviews with those positions. I tried to keep DPW personnel out of it, just more or less because there's a few department heads who put in for it and it might be a little awkward. So we're proceeding forward with that. I anticipate that I'll have some finalists for both positions to present to the board. Your board has to affirm my decision to appoint those positions.
Sometime in September, Jim?
Yeah,
October?
I would say late September at the earliest. That's it for that. Hotel on the Sharon Walpole line near Applebee's. The developer, David Waluka, who was originally the listing agent, bought the interest in the property from the Patel Group. He is proceeding forward. I met with him. The plan I originally saw had 99% of the hotel in Sharon. I just told him that was a non-starter. I wouldn't even present it to the Sewer and Water Commissioners for consideration at that point. He has since agreed to move the plan to a minimum of 50% Walpole, 50% in Sharon. He's going to try to push for more than 50% in Walpole there. The Sewer and Water Commissioners listened to his presentation last Monday night. They agreed to provide sewer and water contingent upon successful negotiation of an intermunicipal agreement. Now, town meeting voted in 2002 to authorize a intermunicipal agreement between the town of Walpole, town of Sharon. Since then, the laws have changed. We no longer need town meeting authorization, even though we already have it. So it's a win-win either way. We can bring it forward. The next step is I need to reach out to the town of Sharon. The Sewer and Water Commissioners would like 100% of the hotel's tax to come to the town because their argument is without the sewer and water, there would be no hotel, period. And Sharon would likely just get a storage facility or something else there. So when I'm just waiting for some finalized plans from the developer, he was going to bring it back to Norwood Engineering now that he had the blessing of the sewer and water. And once I have some plans, I'll present them to your board. And of course, your board will need to agree to any intermunicipal agreement that I present to you. Questions?
Ian, do you have a question?
Unless someone else wants to go
No, go
first.
ahead.
So, as I see this, so my concern is the Sewer and Water Commission originally was opposed to this, and I didn't think it was based on the amount of revenue that the town, that we would get. It was based on that you can't put a price on water as a resource. That's number one, so I'm a little surprised that they're backing away from that. So I guess that's something that could be brought up at one of their meetings. Because notwithstanding the fact of whether we get all of the hotel real estate tax or 50-50 Walpole, 100% of the hotel water will be, that's used is Walpole water. And we already are fragile in terms of our own, the aquifers and the overuse, and we already limit our own water users. So, even if we get 100% of the hotel's tax, presumably the real estate tax is all going to go to Sharon, correct?
No, half would go to Walpole, half to Sharon.
So when you say the 50%
of the hotels, what is proposed, is physically in Walpole. The other 50% is in Sharon, and he thinks he can get retail space all in Walpole.
So when you said 90, so the original plan of 90% of the hotel was located in Sharon, you're saying the
Moved it
plan.
over the line. So
even to go further back, or way back when, 10 years ago, there was a plan for 50-50. So water and sewer has heard about this in the past. We sort of heard about it 10 years ago, or whenever that was. Then a recent plan came in where it was almost all in Sharon. And that's the plan that you know, I also gave word to them that doesn't make any sense.
And that came up during the conservation, they had to file with the Conservation Commission. So the Sewer and Water Commission asked for their comments, solicited some feedback. At the time, the commission said, right now we have no feedback on your wetlands requests, but we are not interested in providing sewer and water to a property that's, the hotel's 99% in Sharon.
Right, it's moot at that point.
One question, sorry to interrupt. What happens to like fire and police if it's 50-50?
They've agreed to place the front door and have Walpole basically be the lead responder on this, and that's, Chief Bailey has requested that. So they've agreed to that. Sharon's off the record agreed to that too. Nothing formal, that'd be covered in part of the municipal agreement though.
Would they be reimbursing? I mean, obviously the details have to be worked out, and I guess that's for another meeting, but I guess my primary concern as a resident and a select person is that essentially it would be another hotel coming online in Walpole if that's how it's going to end up. And have we actually done any kind of, has the Water and Sewer Commission, or do they intend to do any kind of impact statement as to putting however many rooms, 100 rooms?
About 106 to 116.
So 100 odd rooms, additional water usage for the town to put a strain on our water resources. And I just think that's something that we should collaborate and work with Water and Sewer and express our concerns about. Although they're the experts, I think that it's something that...
They will do that. Rick is going to require them to do that and impact, and basically have a formula for each room, how much it's going to tabulate for water usage. So we will require them to do that. We'll do our own too. But
at the end of the day, is it going to be that regardless, it's one thing to get an answer, but it's another thing to say, okay, depending on what the answer is, that will determine how we, or the Water and Sewer Commission goes forward, as opposed to regardless of what the answer is, where we will accept it as a...
So I wasn't at that meeting, but I did have a conversation with one of the Sewer and Water Commissioners, and their feeling was it's not a lot of water, relatively speaking. So it wasn't a huge concern to that person. And again, I don't know if they had any discussion on that, but that was my question as well. Is this a big deal or a little deal? And the point of view was, if they put the hotel in Walpole, we would be providing water if it's 100% in Walpole. So 50-50, you know, is similar. And then it's all about the intermunicipal agreement and what else gets done. So they weren't. He didn't seem to be overly concerned about it. But again, I wasn't at the most recent meeting, so I think there's more discussion to be had.
Much more.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay. As we progress, I'll keep the board updated.
Would you mind pausing so we can go to the 7:30 Pulte Homes?
Sure.
So next up at 7:30 is vote request of Pulte Homes of New England LLC for off-site street improvements on East Street, School Street, High Plains Street. Welcome and come on up.
So while they're coming up, can I give a brief introduction as to?
Yep.
So the reason why Pulte's back before your board is they are currently have a request for the age-qualified 186 units before the planning board. The planning board asked them to come back before the Board of Selectmen to discuss some of the improvements to the three intersections in question here. The intersection up on High and East Street right there where it curves, and we've had a couple of accidents there. The intersection right around the Eastover Road, right there where Pulte, the main entrance is going to be, and the last one being right here at the intersection of East and School Street. So what they're coming before you is offering some of their proposed changes. I've met with police personnel, town engineer, and fire personnel along with Pulte a few weeks ago. Everybody was pretty comfortable with what you're being presented here tonight, and I've asked everyone to be on hand to provide some comments if they'd like some. So that's it.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, board. My name is Matthew Leidner with Civil Design Group. I'm the civil engineer for Pulte Homes of New England, who is proposing a project, an age-qualified village, 15-acre project at the existing Walpole Woodworkers facility at 767 and 77 East Street in Walpole. And we've been in front of the planning board with this project since March of this year, and the project has undergone extensive review by the planning board, by various town departments, engineering, community development, police, and fire. As part of the planning board process, the project was peer reviewed for traffic impacts by McMahon Associates, and as part of that peer review, there were certain areas along East Street. So let me back up. The project itself, the site plan for the project, plus the East Street corridor were studied in terms of traffic impacts. As part of that study and the peer review of that study, there were 3 intersections that were identified as being advantageous to have modifications and improvements proposed in terms of the geometry of the intersections and also the pedestrian accommodations at those intersections. One of them is the existing East Street and School Street intersection. One of them is, so working from west to east, that the site drive, the proposed site drive at East Street, which is directly opposite Eastover Road, and then also East Street and High Plains Street. So as part of the process of the peer review and the review by various town departments, those 3 intersections were identified as being intersections that could benefit from improvements. And so once those 3 intersections were identified, we worked collaboratively with the police department, fire department, and McMahon, the peer reviewer, to work out what the potential improvements to those intersections could be. Pulte's traffic expert, MDM consultants, worked to design conceptual improvements to those 3 intersections, and we've submitted that information to this board with this request for approval. So where we're at right now with the planning board is we've been in front of them since March. We've vetted out, I guess, every aspect of the project, including traffic and these improvements. And we feel that we're near the point of closing with the planning board and having them issue a decision for the project. However, at the last meeting with them, they informed us that any improvements to these off-site areas would need to undergo approval by the Board of Selectmen in order to be referenced in any decision that the planning board renders on the project. So we're here before you tonight to let you know of the history of the project with the planning board, and that these intersections have been discussed at length with both the town's peer reviewer as well as the town departments, police and fire and engineering, who I believe are all here tonight, Mr. Johnson, who's here tonight, and we have our traffic expert, Bob Michaud from MDM Consultants is here. So I guess at the will of the board, if you're interested in hearing an overview of the improvements at each intersection, Bob is here to present that and talk about that. We're also here to answer any questions you may have. We're back before the planning board on September 9th, and our goal and our hope is to answer any questions you have about those improvements and respectfully request your approval of those improvements, so that we can go back before the planning board on September 9th and request that they close the hearing. This is one of the last items that needs to be discussed.
So I would say, why don't you do a short overview?
Okay.
Everybody here has it in their packet, so they've at least glanced through it, but it's always good to see it on the board with an expert.
Excellent. Okay, so I'll turn it over to Bob Michaud from MDM.
That'd be great.
You can present that. Thank you.
Thank you, board members. For the record, Robert Michaud, a managing principal of MDM Transportation Consultants based in Marlborough. What I'd like to do is step the board through the locations that Mr. Leidner just mentioned that were all subject to extensive study, peer review, departmental input. Geographically, the site is located along East Street, just to the east of the signal in the, at the Main Street corridor. The study that we prepared studied the 3 locations that are subject to the so-called mitigation, as well as additional locations. The focal point through the process with the planning board was to first focus on the driveway itself and its access requirements, and more particularly the pedestrian accommodation features that go along with that. The supplemental locations beyond that include the School Street intersection to the west of where the site is, and the High Plain Street intersection to the east. And those are shown in this diagram with some red dots, if you will. So we've got the Main Street signalized location here. School Street became the subject of the evaluation, the driveway in this location, and a High Plain Street. Beginning with the driveway, the concept was to provide a single driveway location that is consistent with commercial standards, with curb radii that would allow and facilitate easy access and egress from the property. That will be a stop sign controlled location, and you'll see that within the context of where the driveway is oriented, which is directly opposite Eastover Road, that there are pedestrian enhancements that include an ADA compliant pedestrian crossing of the driveway and a perpendicular crossing of East Street at just west of that driveway location. This is a location that also serves as an MBTA wave down stop and a bus stop as well on the Eastover Road corner. Through the departmental input from MBTA as well as the planning board, the design was modified to include a rapid rectangular flashing beacon assembly, which would highlight and make prominent a crossing should it occur. It's a push button activated control. It is used throughout the town, we understand, very effectively. So that's a primary feature there. Also, there will be some modifications to the sidewalk systems in that area to repair any tripping hazards, et cetera, and to ensure that the intersection itself in its entirety is ADA compliant and compatible. Moving on to the School Street.
Can I stop you just for a second? Does
Yes,
anybody
sir.
have any questions about that intersection?
Well, I think we also have to open the public hearing for the,
That's an excellent point.
I had some help.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Nancy, you wanna
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing for the request of Pulte Homes in New England LLC.
No,
No, no,
Oh,
no.
where is it?
the wine and malts at 7:40.
Oh,
I can do it.
I was like,
Move to open the public hearing on the transfer of the wine and malt license from Retail Beverage Partners to Wine Cellar Group Mass, and continue that to immediately after the discussion here.
second.
Yeah, so we have a second, motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So does anybody have any questions about the Eastover Street intersection before we move on?
Just, yeah, you mentioned the MBTA. Is there going to be a bus stop? Did I miss you saying that? Or?
There is an existing bus stop there. It's a wave down stop, so if someone were waiting and waved, the bus would stop at that approximate location.
That's great.
The improvements really to remove portions of the grass strip that currently exists there. That represents a tripping hazard for folks who would be getting to or from that bus, so that will be incorporated as part of this design.
I also do like that it's aligned with Eastover Street, because that's
Yes.
very helpful.
Yes.
For people going in any of those directions. So
Yeah,
that's good.
A very traditional design.
Yep.
We like simple and traditional.
Yep.
Moving on to School Street intersection, that was the subject of extensive study in terms of crash experience, volumes, capacity, and we immediately undertook an evaluation that identified several areas that could be improved. under the existing condition, the pedestrian crossings are at skewed alignments, which lengthens the crossing of the intersection. And we also noted that there's an expansive curb radius here that essentially allows for a high-speed movement onto the north leg of School Street. It's a very excessively large curb radius. Pavement markings need to be updated, and the ramp structures that accommodate these crossings are not currently ADA compliant. The proposal is therefore to reduce the curb radius of the East Street to School Street westbound movement in a way that will tighten the intersection up, if you will, reduce the crossing length, while also accommodating the needs for both commercial and/or emergency access onto School Street. We also, as is the case with the driveway, propose a rectangular rapid flash beacon crossing, which is to be located just to the west of the intersection. Because that is a traffic control feature that really needs to stand on its own right, we are eliminating one of the two crossings of East Street. Recall on the east side of the intersection, there's an existing skewed crossing that really doesn't connect to any sidewalks that would continue on School Street. So anyone using that crossing is not only crossing a long length, they're also having to cross School Street again to proceed south further down. So the compromise there was to concentrate all of the pedestrian crossings to a single location that is controlled by the same form of beacon as we have at the driveway. So we believe a safer and a more compliant design. Finally, you'll see that at each corner of the intersection that those corners will be reconstructed in their approximate location, but with improved ramps that are ADA compliant to current standards. The side street approaches of School Street will continue to operate under stop control. However, the pavement markings will be updated in a way that allows for vehicles to pull forward much closer to East Street so that there is enhanced visibility to oncoming vehicles. Any questions?
Any questions about this intersection?
Yeah. Just again about, so is it oriented north-south?
North is up,
Okay.
correct. Yep.
So going west on East Street and then turning right onto School Street, what's the theory behind making that more 90 degrees or?
Sure. The crossing length under the current condition is about 25 to 30 feet longer than it has to be. This design substantially reduces that crossing length to the benefit of the pedestrian while also providing sufficient turning radius for a fire truck or a commercial vehicle, for that matter, to make that movement without encroaching. So we don't know why the curb radius on this was designed the way that it exists, but is excessive. It presents a potential high-speed conflict point with a pedestrian that would be crossing. It lengthens that crossing, and it encourages a higher speed movement on a School Street, which we want to discourage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. The third location is High Plain Street in this orientation, which represents a continuation of East Street from an easterly direction to a more southerly direction, and the continuation of East Street in this orientation. This intersection has a lot of conflicting movements currently because of its orientation.
Hold on one second. Hey, guys at the back, could you guys please be quiet or take it outside if you have something going on that you need to talk about? Thank you. Please.
So there are many conflicting movements because of the geometry here. Proceeding from East Street, making a left turn, for instance, you're in a very short barrel in which you have to stop, wait for a gap in traffic, and proceed, for instance. For folks who are traveling along High Plain Street, making a left turn, they are at an extreme skewed angle, so it's difficult to see a vehicle coming from the east, traveling in this direction without having to crank your neck, so to speak. And that presents an issue for any pedestrian that may be crossing at this location. It's often the case that vehicles are approaching this at a fairly high rate of speed during off hours. They're looking to the right. They don't necessarily come to a full stop, and they're not aware of a pedestrian that may be in that crossing. So there's a safety-related aspect to the alignment from the pedestrian perspective as well. And of course, the movement from East Street to High Plain is a high-speed, uncontrolled movement today. The concept here is to provide geometry which is more traditional in terms of a T or 90-degree alignment. What that does is it eliminates that additional leg of the intersection, if you will. It minimizes the number of conflicting movements within the intersection. It forces a 90-degree stop condition for folks coming from High Plain to turn either left or right, and it allows the relocation of the pedestrian crossing to a point that's much more visible to anyone who's traveling within the intersection. And finally, for those movements that do occur from east to south on the intersection, the right turn movement, this geometry will force that movement to be a slower speed movement than it currently is. Through the input of the Public Works Department, Police, and Fire, Pulte has made a clear commitment to make sure that the geometry here fully accommodates all of the emergency access requirements and commercial vehicle circulation requirements for Route 27 and East Street. And this, as will the other designs, be subject to formal engineering design and approvals by the town. So all of these will be compliant to town standards. They will all be compliant to ADA provisions. They will all be compliant to accommodating pedestrian and emergency vehicle needs. Yes.
Any question, Nancy?
What day did you do your traffic study?
I have the study with me, and I don't know the exact count day, but we have gone out here on 2 separate occasions to count traffic, both during in-school session, both during average season conditions. And if
Could you just
take
a moment to check?
Yes,
Would that be okay?
I have the report with me.
That's a tough intersection.
Yeah.
It's very close to my house. I use it
Yeah.
all the time.
Yep.
This is a great common sense solution.
So the traffic study that was initially submitted was dated to November 2017, and the count periods that we initially used were from December 2016, and subsequent to that, and through the peer review process and departmental review, planning board process, we issued a response to comment document in which we actually conducted supplemental counts that date to.
So how long do you do them in November and December? What
Well,
do you mean?
the count process is to select a peak hour in the morning, or peak period rather, in the morning and in the afternoon. So between the hours of 7 in the morning and 9 in the morning, and 4 in the afternoon and 6 at night, we've conducted counts during those periods. In addition, we've conducted 48-hour traffic volume counts of East Street on 2 separate occasions to validate when the peak hours occur on East Street and at the intersections. The second round of counts, just so you're aware, occurred in March of 2018, and validated what we had collected in December. I'll say that during the process of doing a traffic report, that we have made seasonal correction factors to adjust the December data to what we'd call an average season condition. The March data confirms that that process was in fact accurate, and that the volumes that we've used are representative of a typical travel condition along East Street and the intersections that were the subject of this evaluation.
Because I've seen that 27 going into this intersection
Yep.
can back all the way up almost to the light for Washington Street,
Traveling in the eastbound direction,
traveling towards East Street, coming from Route 1
down to.
down to where this intersection change will be.
at High Plains Street.
At High Plains.
Correct, right. So there is a long queue that we observed and that we've documented in our studies that is a result of the high traffic volumes that occur from High Plains Street to East Street during peak hours. This improvement recognizes a series of geometric and traffic control improvements that are intended to first address the safety requirements of the intersection by reducing the conflict points as well as better accommodating pedestrian movement. I will also say that this design contemplates a future traffic signal to the extent the town wants to pursue that.
Exactly.
And that was the subject of discussion both with the police, the Public Works, and through the planning board process. The peer review also provided comment on the appropriateness of what we're showing here as an improvement. All parties agree that this is the appropriate first step to enhancing the intersection. This location has been the subject of prior evaluation for a traffic signal. That was, in our understanding and through the input we've received from departmental folks who were here at the time that process occurred, that there was some level of resistance to a traffic signal, you know, we think this is the correct first step.
So I'm not sure where the resistance would be for a signal, but I mean, I was on the planning board for 9 years, and that was 9 years ago. And we were had identified that could use a signal then. I think you're absolutely right, going through the process, and now you've gotten to the road commissioners, and I think something that would be very responsible would be to be looking for a traffic signal there.
And we have, in fact, considered that. As a point of context, the project impacts were evaluated and peer-reviewed and discussed with planning board, with the peer reviewer, with the various departments, and the impact of this particular age-restricted project at that location represents less than 1% of the volume that currently uses the intersection. The approach that we've taken on behalf of Pulte was to engage with the town and its department leaders, heads, to identify a series of structural improvements that would make the most sense under today's condition and in light of the limited impact of the project. And in doing so, these types of improvement, and this one in particular, is consistent with the goal, the long-term goal of signalizing the location should that in fact be something the town chooses to do.
I'm one board member, and my long-term goal is now about 18 years out, and I see that being a very important thing, is us obtaining a light signal there sooner than later, and especially knowing that we're going to have people that are age qualified that are going to be pulling out into that intersection. And I think that it's actually something that would be extremely safe, and it would be a great marketing tool to let them know how much Pulte cares about the people pulling in and out of that community, that I think a light is something that we should talk about further, because, I mean, it's something that will benefit everybody that will be living and purchasing in this project, not only the town.
And respectfully, we've actually considered what would need to happen for this to be signalized. This is a local jurisdiction intersection. It is not subject to Mass DOT requirements or approvals. So it's within the clear purview of the town to advance improvements it sees fit here. Pulte's contribution to this is not an insignificant contribution and is entirely consistent with that goal. It is beyond the scope of impact of the Pulte project to propose a full traffic signal here, although it will be designed to accommodate that, again, if the town so chose to follow that path. There are distinct advantages to this design, even understanding that it will remain as a stop-controlled location. We know that during other hours of the day, beyond the peak hours that you reference, when those long queues occur, that this operates well within its capacities without a traffic signal. And because of the orientation of the geometry, it vastly improves the capacity of traffic movements there in two ways. One is reduced conflict points within the intersection, and second is improved geometry that facilitates movements left or right from High Plain Street. So it's, in our view and in Pulte's commitment, consistent with the objectives of first safety, capacity, and the longer-term vision of the signal. This improvement, taken in combination with the two other improvements, is a substantial contribution on behalf of a single developer.
Yeah, I mean, partnership sounds great, and I think we're maybe almost there. I think we can keep working on it.
Any other questions or comments? Ian?
Sure. First, I just want to say I appreciate very much the effort and skill that your company has put into remediating these three intersections. So I think I can speak on behalf of the board for that. With respect to traffic lights, and I know that's not your purview because that's outside of the scope of what you were tasked to do. But since we're on the subject of traffic lights don't always alleviate traffic backup, as is seen heading towards Route 1 on High Plain Street and Washington Street. In the morning, the traffic lights back us up all the way to this intersection right here. But that's a conversation for a future meeting. And to the my observation is that to the extent that this is somewhat of a dangerous intersection, your remediation has clearly tackled and made it a much safer intersection with the new configuration. So I think it will suffice and be perfectly safe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask, did the police have any additional comments on this intersection at all? If you do, come on up. Just, and the same with you, Chief, if you have anything you want to add. And then I'll go to Maggie real briefly, so.
I have a few too.
I'm sorry?
And I have a couple
Okay,
questions.
great.
I spoke with Chief Carmichael about this. I was at the meetings that we all went to, and we do agree that this new intersection is going to be a lot safer and better off for the town of Walpole. And they are able to put stuff in that's going in the future. If the town does want to put a light there, we'll be able to do that. The police department does agree that this is sufficient for where this project is going to go.
Okay, any questions or? Thank you. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We too met with everyone involved and went through the plans. Our only concern was the High Plain Street at East Street and making sure that the turning radiuses were there, and we were assured that they would in fact be there for the fire apparatus. So we are comfortable with the plan as presented.
Okay, thanks. Let me go to David and then we'll go to Maggie. David?
So I have a couple of questions. First of all, this was in our packet. What was that?
Through the consultation process with the town, particularly with the planner, we were asked whether or not an alternative design would be feasible that is consistent with the diagram that you have there. That diagram introduces raised delineating islands along East Street, as well as a slip lane, if you will, from East Street to High Plain Street. It's a more challenged design, frankly, that is not feasible within the context of the right-of-way that currently exists at the intersection. All of the improvements that are shown here are to be done within available rights-of-way. We're also sensitive to the fact that the existing island feature is a memorial site, or soon to be, and that will be retained and, in fact, enhanced through this process. So that's what that figure represents.
And my next question is, why no crosswalk along East Street?
The East Street sidewalk on the south side of the street terminates roughly where you see the color in that diagram. There's a private driveway, and the existing crossing is placed so that if you were traveling along High Plain Street, if you were walking along High Plain Street, it's easier to point it out. there's a sidewalk along this edge.
Okay.
You could proceed to a crossing point in approximately this location where you would then come onto this sidewalk feature. There aren't any sidewalks on the south side of East Street here or on the east side of High Plain Street, so you wouldn't be crossing to anything. That's the short answer.
By not existing sidewalks, you mean no completed, there's space for sidewalks, is there, or?
I don't believe that there's a whole lot of right-of-way there for sidewalks. I can't speak exactly to the offset between the curb and the property lines, but I don't believe that there's excessive right-of-way on that side, and it may be one of the reasons that the sidewalk doesn't exist on that side.
As you said, at the other intersection with the more 90-degree turn, do you expect that it will become easier to get out of that intersection now that people have to slow down to make that right-hand turn? Or?
So the approach, because it's at an improved angle, will allow a motorist to easily see vehicles left or right, as opposed to today's condition in which they're literally cranking their neck pretty hard to the right and not necessarily seeing a high-speed oncoming vehicle that may or may not be going through the intersection, and that's a significant safety issue. So for folks who are currently making that left turn movement from High Plain Street, there's some level of hesitancy, frankly, because of the rate of speed of the approaching vehicle. And so under this design, bless you, where folks would be making a slower speed right turn movement with more restrictive geometry and an improved ability to see that vehicle in either left or right, it's going to make it easier.
Yeah, I was thinking that because when I've gone through the intersection, even though they have their blinker on,
Right. Doesn't mean they're going to use it.
you look and they're still going fast.
Yes.
And they don't get that signal to you. Not only are they turning, they're slowing down to turn. Not only is there a signal on, they're about to make that turn. And I think that does make a lot of sense.
That's exactly right. And this also enhances the aesthetic of the intersection at the same time, where there's far less pavement, if you will. Opportunities for additional landscaping. I mentioned the memorial within the island feature, et cetera.
I'm sorry, you all said, David?
Yes,
Ian?
Just to piggyback on what you were saying, David, currently, because it's sort of a soft right-hand turn, many cars don't even put on their blinker, so you don't even know that they're turning. I think just psychologically, knowing that it's a more of a 90-degree turn, people will instinctively put on their blinker to make that turn, so they'll be more cognizant of doing that, which will be a huge help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I ask Maggie to come up? Why don't you start with this intersection, Maggie? I know this is one of the bad ones. I go through it every day pretty much, and I'm always surprised at what people do at that intersection. So.
That intersection's been the subject of much discussion, it seems, about every 20 years. We went through 3 different consultants about 20 years ago, and we looked at every configuration. We looked at lights, we looked at configuring the lanes, and nothing ever came of it because we couldn't, that's what I think he mentioned. We couldn't no one could come to a consensus as to what they wanted in the neighborhood as far as signage, signals, so nothing was done. And something tells me about 20 years before that, back in the 70s, the Topics program did the same thing and nothing was done. So this represents, while it may not be everything, it represents significant improvement to what's there now, we believe.
Do we have any idea what it would cost to signalize that intersection?
No, but I know the Walmart signals that went in up by Walmart's driveway on 27, the construction alone, forget about the design of it, but the construction alone was about $750,000. It was approaching 720.
That was state though, right? So the question is.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
Maggie, what about the lights in front of Big Y?
It's long ago. I don't know. It's long enough ago that I don't have those figures in hand.
The $750,000, that's at the car wash?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
correct. Right at the
Wow.
Walmart site driveway.
That's
Yeah,
a cheap
that was
intersection, is it? Well,
that was based on the amount of the bond that they had to provide for us for road opening, which kind of it split out their costs. But that, just bear in mind, that didn't include the design of them. That was just construction.
What about in front of Stop and Shop?
You mean where Rockland Credit Union is now? I don't know, only because that was a state job, that was a state highway, so I don't have those figures.
So I would say, I think these are improvements, and I think this will help that intersection. Though I agree with Nancy, I'd like to see us as a town, you know, at least do a little bit of work to figure out what would it cost us, you know, to signalize that intersection. I'm personally not gonna hold up Pulte. If we decided to do this, you know, it'd be good to have a rough idea of what that may cost. So, not a high priority, but you know, see what the rest of the board thinks.
Is there conduits being put in?
I do not believe so. I think basically they're configuring the intersection so that if we put in signals, the roadway itself would be at the angles and the configuration that it should be.
And so then we'll be paving it, and it'll be all good to go, and there'll be no conduits in the ground. So we
Because
won't
without the signal design, you don't know where to put the conduits.
But with design and conduits, at least if there's another next step that's closer than saying automatically we're not gonna dig up a road for at least 5 or 10 years. An intersection.
Any other questions?
I do have one.
Sure, go right ahead.
It was about the peer review. What got peer reviewed? That's it.
The originally submitted traffic study, the design options that you see here, and the peer reviewer was also a participant in the discussions with the department heads during the process. So we issued a response memorandum to peer review on their initial comments in the traffic report, and a second supplemental that addressed specific comments on these designs.
And what were some of the comments on this design, or was there some disagreement on this?
There was actually concurrence on all 3 locations. In fact, the peer reviewer went so far as to corroborate that the first appropriate step to the improvements is what you see geometrically. Traffic signals are not necessarily a panacea, nor should they be a first line of action for any location. Once these improvements are in place, that will allow for an evaluation of the actual performance of the intersection prior to implementing a second form of control like traffic signals. So there was, in fact, concurrence on that point, both here and at School Street.
Yeah, one of the things that I think kind of mitigates against a traffic signal at this time, if we have other locations that need them as well, is that there's not a lot of traffic coming down East Street from the north in this direction. And so you're really only needing to control those 2 directions there, which I'm not sure. If you can get people to be orderly in their turns, it might be enough movement, I would think. I don't know.
I agree with that. I'd rather see 27 be continuous. But I did see there's not enough land in the right-of-way to clean up that intersection. So Route 27 could be the flow-through.
Correct.
And, you know, I think that's the real solution. But, you know, as we can see in the photo, there's houses and yards, you know, literally feet off the road, so.
Correct. That you know, we work within the constraints that we had, and based on the history of prior public input that we were privy to, enhancements to the intersection that we think will meet favorably with the abutters within the intersection. There'll be an enhancement to open space, if you will, that we think will be saleable to the abutters.
Okay. Maggie, any final comments? Words of wisdom?
No, just that as part of the agreement, Pulte is fronting or will be paying for complete design, plans, construction, and installation, and everything from soup to nuts, rather than in the olden days, 20 years ago when we did when the town approved the toll bar, the subdivision in East Walpole, they had to extend a water main, and rather than have toll design and construct, they gave us money, which by the time we got to it, wouldn't cover it. So we figured out a better way to do it would be to have them furnish design plans and procure construction services. It will be bonded under the street opening permit policy that this board has, in fact, through our office, and we will work with them. The one thing you might want to have them explain is the construction timing on these. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I know they do, in terms of their COs and what's tied to what.
Okay, that'd be good.
Great. Thanks, Maggie. In terms of timing, this was laid out, I believe, in the memo or the letter that we sent to this board. And so for all 3 intersections, site driveway, School Street, High Plain. The proposal is to implement the design plans and secure bonds by the first building permit for the project. So there's 4 buildings at the project. So building permit for building number 1, the first building to be built. We would have all 3 designs done, submitted for review, and then securing bond by the building permit. In terms of construction of the improvements, we worked with Maggie and talked about timeline. We also discussed this with the planning board. So we are proposing that the improvements at the site driveway, because it is at the site, it's necessary to construct the driveway and get occupancy for the first building. So naturally, those we're proposing to be completed for the final CO for building 1, the first building to be constructed. For the School Street improvements, we are proposing, again, the design and bond to be secured by the building permit for building number 1, the actual improvements to be constructed and completed by CO for the 3rd building to be constructed. And then lastly, High Plain, again, design, bond secured, first building permit for building 1, and then the improvements constructed by the CO for the 4th building in the project. So we'd like to kind of phase these intersections and the improvements to the intersections as we go through the project and build and sell units in the project.
Great. Any additional questions?
And what's your date for completion of 4?
It really
know
is,
it-
it's
I know it's
market
moving.
driven. So, so let me step back. This is a for sale condominium development. It's not rental units. So these will be homeowners that will be purchasing a condominium in these buildings. So we, unlike perhaps a rental project where they may construct multiple buildings and then rent them out, this is really more market driven. So the idea is that they would, as soon as they acquire the land from Walpole Woodworkers, they would move right away to get the building permit for the first building and start building. It's roughly an 11 to 12 month process to build one of these buildings, but the timelines overlap. So in other words, they would be onto the second building before they get the CO for the first building. So there's some overlap there. So it's really it's 4 buildings total. So it's really around a 3 to 4 year process total build out for the project.
So may I further?
Please, sure.
So, though the timeline is set to coincide with the completion of the 4th building, is it required that there be a 4th building before your obligation to build it, rebuild this intersection? In other words, if there's some economic downturn or decision that you're not going to build a 4th building,
Yes.
will there still be a commitment to build the intersection?
Yes. So of course, it's our intention to build the full project, the full build out, all 4 buildings. But that being said, if something were to happen where, for some reason, Pulte would not build a particular building, say 3 buildings were built and the 4th was not, again, all these improvements will be bonded upon the first building permit for the first building. So if that were to happen, that money would be available for then the town to go ahead and make those improvements.
Okay, so the timing's only related to the building of the 4th building, not the obligation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
Do you know
You
how to
good?
do it?
No.
Nope. Move to approve the request of Pulte Homes of New England LLC for off-site street
Hold on one
improvement.
second, yep.
Can we still make comments?
No, this isn't a public hearing. What, it's not a public hearing, right?
Yeah, to the public.
What?
We open it to the public for comment.
No, we opened a public hearing on a liquor license transfer and then put it on hold. So that one, when we reopen it, that one will allow public comment.
Okay.
Because that was a time-sensitive public hearing.
Sorry about that, we didn't mean to confuse the issue. Okay, sorry.
Motion to approve the request of Pulte Homes of New England LLC for off-site improvements on East School and High Plain Street as presented and recommended by both engineering and police and fire.
So I'll second that. Any further discussion?
I just wanted to add my no vote is going to be because I feel that Walpole has made a lot of accommodations, and I feel like these traffic improvements are a step in the right direction, but Walpole deserves more.
Okay, so a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
3-1. Good luck.
Thank you very much.
When are you next before the planning board? There may be people on TV who want to.
September 9th, we will
September
be in
9th.
front of the planning board.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Was there anybody here for the public hearing on the transfer of the wine and malt liquor license? Okay. All right, let's do that next. Come on up.
So we continued it, we need to reopen
Just
it.
reopen it, yeah.
You make a motion?
I'll make a motion to reopen the public hearing for the transfer of wine, malt, and package store license.
I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Attorney Trish Farnsworth, on behalf of the proposed licensee, the applicant. And with me are, from here, from my left, is Joy Schwerman with Wine Cellar Group. In the middle is Angela Casares, the proposed manager, and then Chris Peterson, also with Wine Cellar Group. So we're here just for a transfer of the existing Section 15 beer and wine license that's within the Stop and Shop premises. It has been operating for about a year, and this is a change of ownership. It's not a change in operations at all, and there haven't been any problems or issues there as far as I know. And so I think Joy will just tell you a little bit briefly, I know it's getting late, about just Wine Cellar, the new owner, and Chris is in charge of operations. So one of their really key things is training and making sure that there's no sales to minors and such. So she can just delve into that a little bit more. And Angela will be the manager on record if you have questions for her, but she's TIPS certified, is working there now, and has experience. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Joy.
Great. Yep. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Joy Schwerman, and I'm an officer director for the Wine Cellar Group, Massachusetts. And we are hoping to come into your town. We have boutique wines. That is our little niche. We like to get to know our customers and provide wonderful wine for them at very good prices. So,
Great.
Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions, David?
I do have, one of the things that, one of the concerns I've had about the location of the store and the way it's set up is that the store is not open all of the hours that the Stop and Shop is open. So there are certain periods where the store is closed and Stop and Shop is opened, and that the only barrier is the metal fencing on wheels. And I have some concern about how movable that metal barrier is and how close product is to the metal barrier. And I just want to make sure that I'm not going to hold it up here today, but that you guys look at that and make sure that there is a more secure way of making sure that barrier or that the product is far enough away from the barrier.
If you'd like to answer, just come up on the microphone. You know what, just come to the microphone, thanks.
Hi, Hi, good evening. I currently am working there, and this was noted a year ago, I believe. As a result of the interaction from last time, we have made a very conscious effort to make sure that nothing tangible, for example, a bottle is not necessarily in arm's reach, only boxes, and everything else is pushed away. So we have made a concerted effort to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes.
Ian?
I will direct it to whomever can answer about the corporation.
About the corporation?
Correct. Wine Cellar Group, Mass.
Yes.
That's DB. So I do note that the officers and directors are all, with the exception of Thomas Armand, who resides in Brockton. Could you tell me a little bit about the company?
The company, we've been in existence since 1990. I've worked there since 2009, and that's approximately when Thomas Hassler went ahead and bought the business. And it was a very friendly transfer, and our goal is to just have small boutique wines in, the various states. We're currently in New Jersey and Connecticut and New York, here on the East Coast, also Raleigh and Florida, down in Boynton Beach in Florida. And then we have our main location, our corporate location, I should say, is in Illinois, and we have a couple small stores there, and we're currently opening up a third, hopefully next week. And then we have a location in Colorado and one in Seattle, Issaquah, actually, close to Seattle. And then also in Missouri and in Ohio.
And I do notice that Tom Hassler
Yes.
resides in London, and I'm not sure what his position is in the company because it says other.
He helps out with marketing. He's very involved with, he knows a lot about our budget and our long-range plans. He always approves those and works closely with our president, Matt Booker.
But he is a corporate officer?
Tom Hassler is not currently, he is.
I'm just curious as to why he's listed here.
Oh, he's listed because he's a corporate officer of the parent company. but
Which
he's not-
is Clendenin Holdings?
Correct.
Out of Buffalo Grove, Illinois.
Correct.
Okay, so it sounds like you've had at least success in your other states, which is why you're continuing to expand. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Did you want Chris to just
Sure.
tell a little bit, because it is super
Yep.
what they do.
Hi, I'm Christine Peterson, and my role in this company is to work with all of our stores and train the managers on our compliance procedures. We have a 100% carding procedure. We have the ID scanners located in all of our locations at every register. It's posted in every store that we do 100% carding. All of our employees are TIPS certified or a cellar server training that might be required in a different state. In Illinois, it's Bassett training. So compliance is one of our biggest areas of, I don't want to say concern, but we monitor it very closely. I personally manage and audit the scanners every month for every location. And do you have any questions for me about our
I'd
age
make a comment.
verification?
We do take compliance very seriously, and we hope you're never back here due to a compliance issue. We have had other establishments in the town who repeatedly violated, and we did go as far as to pull their license twice. We did do battle with the state ABCC over that, but that restaurant was recently sold. And is changing ownership, but it was a really long period of time where really bad things happened, including car accidents, and underserving kids who were way underage. So, I don't think anything like that's gonna happen, but we have had that happen in the past. We do appreciate people who are really concerned about doing the right thing. I'm glad that you have a card reader, and you know everybody's trained and tip certified and all that. That's a great start. So,
Yes, we take that very seriously.
I do have a question.
Sure.
I mean, how do your customers react to the 100% carding?
With understanding, it's very rare that we get pushback. I will say, I think I hold the record in the company, carding a 90-year-old gentleman. On occasion, people do not want to have their ID scanned. So we have refused sales for that issue, but that's extremely rare. We're very close to our companies, or to our customers. We're small stores. We know our people, so it's
so
extremely
does the
rare.
scanner keep a record of this?
It does.
I see.
Mhm.
And so, and you've had customers go away because they wouldn't allow the scan to take place, is that correct?
Mhm.
Great, I like the 100%. Me personally, I don't see why there's any concern about handing over your card for the being carded. I might understand the scanner thing a little bit, but as far as showing your ID, I don't think anybody, you know, it's just, you hand over your credit card, you can hand over your license. It's not that much of an extra step. Thank you.
We feel that it's not easy to judge age, so taking the guesswork away from our employees and just making it 100% is protecting everyone.
great. Ann?
I don't want to belabor the point, but just about the scanning, what do you do with that information? Is it stored? Is it the driver's license information with all the personal identifying information?
It is stored on the scanner. Nobody has access to that once a month. I do monitor the number of scans in all locations, and then the information is deleted, but the scanner is a secure scanner. It is not, it is standalone and not tied to any of our other systems.
And every month the information is deleted from the system, so no one has access to it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So, just one more question.
No.
Do you just compare the number of scans to the number of sales? Is that what you do? That's great. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Is there anybody here for the public hearing that would like to make a comment? Please come up.
Thank you.
This is for the liquor license transfer, so we'll go to open forum right after this, sorry. You had notes, so it didn't look like you were here for this, so. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
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 I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of wine and malt package store license from Retail Beverage Partners Walpole Inc. to the Wine Cellar Group Mass Inc., located at 565 Main Street, and the new manager is Angela Corellis.
I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being patient. You guys were here early.
So for open forum, which we'll go to next, I know there's people here who want to talk about the train for sure. One of the things about open forum is we're here to listen to open forum. We can't really discuss it, just due to the open meeting laws. So please come up, feel free. We did have a little discussion about the train line, and there may be a couple of points at which Jim may want to comment, but as a board, we're not allowed to really get involved in any back and forth. If there's stuff that we should be talking about, we can schedule that topic into a future meeting, which is often what happens. Or if it's something simple, you know, Jim can follow up on that separately. So please come up. Yeah, and usually we give you about 2 minutes to make your point. And if you're here making the same point as somebody else, you know, maybe you can have somebody who sort of speaks for a small group. So, Bill, I'm going to just go to that woman who had raised her hand first before. Thank you. And introduce yourself for the vast TV audience.
Hi, my name is Kathleen.
You can pull the microphone down. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
My name is Kathleen Cleary. I live at 3 Strufelt Road, and I am here on behalf of establishing a quiet zone for the Summer Street crossing in South Walpole. So I was not here earlier, obviously, and I don't know what was discussed about the train and so forth.
But one of the things that I would like to bring to the board's attention, if it has not already been brought, is that this federal form, which is called a U.S. Department Crossing Inventory Form, which is what the government uses to grade railroad crossings, is egregiously incorrect to Summer Street and needs to be improved, corrected. I did speak with a gentleman at the DOT department yesterday in Cambridge who stated that even though the form is incorrect, it does not prevent us from moving forward with creating a quiet zone in South Walpole at the train crossing. My overall opinion, and likewise many people that I have conversed with on Facebook and directly, is that the town fought to keep the train from coming to South Walpole. And it is my opinion, and that everyone else's, is that the town band together to preserve our community, to keep it as a quiet zone. Whether or not, we can do no horn, a wayside horn, anything that will maintain the integrity and the quality of life in South Walpole. So I have this form, I have put together information of what is incorrect on the inventory crossing. I was able to pull up information about a bill for the quiet zone that has funding until 2022 for quiet zones, whether or not the town has tapped into that. So basically, I am beseeching you as a South Walpole and representing some people that I've conversed with on Facebook to please help us band together. We fought the train, we didn't win. Now, can we band together to fight the noise that's going to come with this train? The crossing guard, according to the plans, are going to be tubular metal. They're not going to be the regular gate with the lights and the horn and so forth. So whether or not that constitutes quiet zone, probably not. So it's in the construction phase, and based on what I have researched over the weekend, is that while it's still in the construction phase, we can make changes, we can request changes to the MBTA to do so, to make this appropriate.
So here's what I would say. If you've got a form that has incorrect information on it, I'd ask you to give that information to Cindy either now or as soon as you can. We can't really get into that discussion. If we want to have a discussion about quiet zone and all that,
This is the form?
we can talk about that and schedule it.
My analysis of the incorrect.
Is there something we
I
can do in
have-
executive session to
Well,
discuss?
that's,
Sure.
I was
Yeah,
gonna
we
have.
absolutely could.
And
I was gonna make a public request that we have been having discussions in executive session about the train. And I would like to request the board and, Jim, if you can arrange that, another executive session for us to take some information in that has been dropped off with Cindy, and we could meet in executive session to look over that information and discuss it with the town attorneys.
Sure.
on that form, it states there are no buses that cross Summer Street. 0. It was filled out in June of 2016. Who, at 2016, says 0 buses cross? Signage on that form states that we have an elevated train track. Do we have an elevated train track at Summer Street? We don't have elevated train track at Summer Street. The sign that we have at Summer Street is not denoted on the inventory crossing form. So there is a great deal of error on that form.
And I appreciate, I know the whole board appreciates your giving that information. I will ask if there's anybody else who wants to speak to the train topic. I will mention just 2 quick things that we did discuss earlier, so it's not new discussion. We are very concerned about what's going on with the MBTA crossing at Summer Street. We feel like as a board and as a town, we get very little feedback. The feedback we get is not very valuable. I'm very concerned, I think the board is very concerned about the safety aspect. I did mention that last weekend last Thursday night during the Patriots game, the Patriots train did come through the intersection, and the lights were not even flashing, never mind a barrier. So the Walpole police who were nearby did stop traffic. But, you know, there was a lot of discussion about whether that intersection is gonna have barriers or not. And Jim mentioned that the MBTA plan that they signed off on in July shows barriers on the sidewalk as well as on the street. So we're very concerned about that. We do understand they're still in the process of construction.
Well, one of my other concerns is being on the Department of Transportation. I came across the website of who has quiet zone areas, and the Norfolk train crossing is designated as a quiet zone, which is less populated than Summer Street. So the question is, why would Norfolk obtain the appropriate crossing, bars, lights, flashing, that is less populous than Summer Street? I mean, for our bars, we should have the heavy-duty bars with the flashing lights, not a tubular with high gloss, flossy, shiny paint. So, yeah.
You know more than I do, so I'll be interested.
I just investigated more, that's all. I don't want to say I know more.
Not for discussion, but would you be able to provide your full name and contact information to Cindy?
I already have.
Oh,
You already
more
have
than one.
everything?
Yes,
Okay, thanks.
yes.
Great.
Okay.
Is there anybody else for the train issue? Bill, come on up, and then Joanne.
I have a theory on why the lights don't go on sometimes. I've witnessed it also. And that's because you have two trains with two different speeds. The freight train at 10 miles an hour and the passenger train at, they claim 40 miles an hour, but I've seen it going faster. Now, the signal only goes off 10 seconds before the train arrives at the intersection. If you have a 10-mile-an-hour train, that signal, the switch that activates the lights, is very close to the tracks. Now, if you have a train that is going at 60 miles an hour or 50 miles an hour, and they do go fast, it hits the signal to put the lights on, but 10 seconds have to evolve before that happens, and they're already through the intersection and turned the lights off at the other side. Now,
Let me stop you there, only because Jim did mention earlier, and I didn't get all of his key points, but the police did go out and survey the train tracks, looked at visibility, and they brought up that whole 10-second delay in the train at full speed.
The engineering
Could they even stop and the whole bit? So we're very concerned about everything going on in that intersection. And Jim has also asked our state representatives as well as the MBTA and MassDOT to make sure that the train comes through at 15 miles an hour, I believe is what you said, Jim.
We're asking for that.
Rather than 40 to 50, which is what the MBTA is talking about. So
and that would make the lights work for both trains, not just the freight train. Now, the other thing is, you know, and I've witnessed the children going to South Walpole Pool and also going to the boarding school, and they ride their bikes down the sidewalk on the fire station side. When they come down, just before they cross those tracks, they diagonally cross the tracks, which means their peripheral vision for a train coming is lost. So it's very dangerous for the kids riding their bikes. And it's dangerous for all kinds of people, especially where the sidewalk switches like that, and you have the diagonal crossing. And even when the signals go off, sometimes people feel that they have more time and they try to beat the train.
Yep.
There's no gates there. We need gates there, and it's a requirement. Now, I know that the attorneys have said, well, it's not, it is a requirement, it isn't a requirement. But everyone that I've talked to that has expertise on it, and I talked to the chief safety engineer, he said CSX doesn't require gates, and that's why they took them down, because they were there before. He said, but passenger trains do. So the Patriot train's a passenger train, it requires gates. There should be gates there because the gates bring your attention to focus, because that noise. And the other thing about people, pedestrians or bike riders, when that train is off in the distance coming to the stadium, it starts with a noise way off, way off. It starts a slow noise, like a white noise. So by the time it gets to the intersection, you're already used to that noise. So you don't hear the train coming because you've heard it coming a long time ago but didn't realize it. So it is very dangerous. It's the most dangerous intersection in North America.
Thank you. Thanks for your feedback. Joanne?
Hi, Joanne Mulligan. I'm an RTM from Precinct 5, and again, I really want to thank you all because I know how much time you've all spent on the train issue over many years, but I don't really have anything more to add, and I just am extremely concerned about the safety, and I, crazily enough, have this in my head that someone did say during the pilot that they weren't going to put the gates in. So I'm not even going to go there in the quiet zone until we know 100%. And Jim, I know you have, you know, the diagrams and that says that we're getting the gates, but I have an email that I wrote like May 20th, but there's no answer that, but it was like, what's going on with the gates? And I would actually ask if you guys could check, just get it in writing one more time, maybe.
I already sent out an email requesting it this evening in writing.
And another thing that just that occurred to me, I don't know how many of you guys, when you're in the CVS parking lot, you know, and the train goes by, like, it definitely, I have no idea what speed that train's going on. I'm not good at judging that. But I always am startled by it. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah, there's
and
a
it's
definite whoosh.
quiet. It's quiet, and it just comes upon you so fast that, and then, you know, goes by. So I'm wondering, does anyone have any idea, well, you're not supposed to answer me, right? You know, how fast that train's going, because that's really close to Walpole Station. Not, you know, it's only, I think, 0.8 of a mile between the crossing in Summer and where the new Gillette Craft Line train is going to have their platform. But this is just getting scarier and scarier, I think, and great, we have a street that's not as bumpy, and they did a good job, you know, on that, but I can't even go there in a quiet zone discussion until I know that there's gates, in my opinion.
So here's my suggestion, that we add a discussion about the train, either to our next meeting or the one after, whenever we think we can have more information. I know for a fact that Jim has asked for more meetings, and they basically have said,
they're terrible at
thanks, but no
answering.
thanks.
Yeah.
So I think we do need to pin them down on, are there gates going in right away, or is that only, was it sort of a bait and switch, and they're only gonna put gates in if it becomes permanent?
And I think we
We'll
all
try to dig in on
have
that.
different materials, like that say the proposed pilot, and it's my understanding, I mean, I believe that once the pilot's over, we will have the crossing gates, but as I said, I may be crazy, but I really do think it came up at some point that they were like, we don't need it for the pilot.
Jim was also mentioning that I think you said you heard that the pilot may start as soon as this fall.
There were rumors floating out
Oh,
there.
another rumor.
There's a rumor, absolutely, that people,
So
now I
it'd
don't
be
know
good
if
if
it's
we could dig
because
in
the
I don't see that
road-
happening. I sent out a request this evening asking
their
about
work
that
isn't
because I
done.
heard about that rumor.
And it
As
might have
far
been-
as the gates are concerned, Joanne, when I left the room this evening, that was the assistant town engineer. He was able to, he said no, because he's been involved. I've had town personnel on site because I want to know what's going on down
No, I've
there.
seen them.
So
And thank
he's
you.
been down there. He confirmed that there are gates, but he did tell me, he said the gates aren't gonna go in until the commuter trains are in there. So they're not looking to put those gates in until then. I have asked them to
But
listen
that
to
would
us.
be
I have
technically,
asked
we
our
think,
state
the beginning of the
representatives to
pilot,
listen to
right?
us. They're working hard, but
Yeah.
we're getting nowhere with
Yeah.
these people at all.
I know.
And that's what the frustrating part on my end is because the town is basically the focal point for the MBTA, and we're not getting much information. You folks, and Kat, we've spoke via email lots of times. I'm just getting nowhere with them, literally. I have our lawyers working on this, I'm working on it from my end, nothing.
And even the state reps, that it just, somebody should be able to,
Yeah.
getting an answer from the state.
Yep.
It's really so frustrating. You know, we know the train's coming. I'm not arguing that anyway. I've stopped that argument. But I just am very nervous. And to Mr. Hamilton's points, you know, there's a lot of people, young, old, you know, little kids going to school, going to Boyden, and or they're just going up to Papagino's and McDonald's, and they're crossing that all the time. And there's a lot of blind spots. I mean, those lights have never worked well. I'm going to assume they're going to fix that. I mean, people stop if they're blinking, and then no trains coming in, they go, and a train may come, but it's, you know, at least at that point it was kind of really rumbling along slow. I just can't even imagine. And you hear so many things on TV about how people, they don't hear the train. It's, you know, it's like that, I guess it is that soft, you know, and people don't realize what's really happening, and it's very frightening to me. But thank you all for all your efforts, really.
We'll get this topic added to the agenda,
Okay.
either the next meeting or the one after, based on
Jim,
how soon
and
we
thank
think we
you,
can get some
everything.
info.
I know
so.
you've been working so.
Jim, what's it called that we pay the train?
Our assessments.
Our assessment.
Last I checked, it's like $535,000 a year. And it's not even like we get to pay it. They take it out of our local aid.
Oh,
So
I was gonna say,
I
well, how
can't
about
withhold a bill.
Welcome, Ron. Hold on one second. Something new, Bill, or?
Yes. You limited me to train. I have one other topic.
Okay, let these guys, no, let's these guys go first. Then I'm happy to have you come back up. Ron, you're up. Vast TV audience is waiting for you.
We did this by height in our committee meeting, and I got stuck. My name is Ron Fusil. I live at 87 Lewis Ave, and I am a member of the Old Town Hall Rehabilitation Committee. We read in the paper that a statement was made and an article is going to be placed on the fall town meeting relative to the renting of the Old Town Hall. And let me just read not that I like to read out of the paper, because they're not as reliable as I like to say. A further item, said Johnson, would relate to the rental of the Old Town Hall. Several people have been asking about renting of the building, he said, but the board needs town meeting approval to do so. Johnson suggested an article that would be give the selectmen authorization to rent out the hall. That's only one thing that we were looking at under your auspices as a viable project for the town hall. Renting it, certainly if you have somebody who could rent the whole hall, then you should run as fast as you can and get them, as long as it's not as long as it doesn't hurt the downtown area. We're only looking at not only renting, we're looking at selling with our holding the ownership. So what we need is some direction relative to this article that's going to go on the town floor.
Can I give you some?
Sure.
So, and I'm just gonna I'm not gonna have any new conversation. I'm gonna repeat what we talked about 2 weeks ago. So the gist of it is that we know that you're looking, you know, at the whole reuse thing. We know that you're gonna come back and give us a report at some point, and we're waiting for that.
Yes.
We don't have I don't know of anyone in specific who wants to rent it at this point, but we know that there's three possible outcomes. We sell it, we use it ourselves, you know, for many uses, or we rent it. And just to be prepared and be on top of the game, there is an article on the warrant, which we actually closed the warrant today. We didn't take a vote on the merits of that article, but that article is on the warrant, so that if you come back with a recommendation and we agree that we should rent it whole or in part or whatever, we as the Board of Selectmen would have the ability to do that. That's all that is. We're not trying to jump ahead of you. We just knew that the warrant closed today. If we wanted it on there, you know, that was the time to put it. There was also no reporter here, so I think maybe they watched the film and wrote up some stuff, so, you know.
That's why I don't like to read out of the paper.
So that's what I can tell you, so. And if you want to have a discussion, we're happy to put you on the agenda so we can have a real conversation.
What we were trying to do is, you know, your agendas are usually, you know, we don't want you to burden you with it until we want to come back, you know, and give you information relative to the building and what we would propose you sponsor. But we don't want to see something on the town floor that only talks about renting. If you have a more expansive word which would be reuse or more than just the renting of the building. Because we think that, that certainly would be a possibility, but it is a large building, and there are other options that you will have available to you in the near future, hopefully. And we will come before you, and you will have to test us as to whether they're viable. So we were just concerned with the wording and not sponsorship, whether or not we should be with you on that article. Since the committee is going to go out and start telling people that the building is not a municipal building anymore, it is, in fact, a building that we, the town, are trying to do something with in the future. So we just wanted to, based on that little article.
Yeah, I would just say we weren't trying to get out ahead of you, other than if in fact the recommendation and the vote of the board is to rent, we wanted to have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Realizing that, if we miss this opportunity, it's another 6 months before we got a crack at it.
Yeah.
So, and we didn't vote on the merits of any of those articles, and it will go to FinCom. So my speaking only for myself, my assumption is that you'll be in to talk to us before that gets to town meeting, and if it's a moot point.
We're not going to quit on mass.
Sorry, we should have called you. But,
Yeah, I just, again, also want to add that it doesn't, that article has nothing to do
Authorization.
with the reuse committee. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with our ability to make decisions based on what you come back with.
Thank you for your time.
And
Thank
you know
you,
when you
Councilman.
want to come back.
Chairman,
Whenever you know that you'd like to come and schedule time, go through Cindy. We're
Surely.
expecting you at some point, so.
Mr. Chairman, Richard Pila, 4 Berkeley Drive, Chairman of the Old Town Hall Reuse Committee. I did, just to add to what Ron was saying, is that, and we communicated by email earlier today, and we understand the reason for the warrant. What we were suggesting is that in order, at some point, the board is going to need to make a decision. And we saw the term rental as limiting the board from what its options are. And that's why we're saying that the board would also entertain, if it deems that that is the best course of action for the town, a potential sale of the property or a master lease of the property. But just to incorporate language that gives you a lot more flexibility and not limits you just to rent. Because if something viable comes along and it's other than for rental purposes, then does that limit you? So that's the point we wanted to make.
That. I can't comment on that, but I'm sure Jim is listening, and he may have some ideas. Thank you. Anybody else? Bill, jump right up.
I know the article's closed for town meeting, but I just learned that the planning board voted 2-2 not to put a moratorium article on for the downtown center. And I was hoping that the selectmen would, it's an article that was prepared by town council, the selectmen would support that article at town meeting, because we're adding 190, 150 apartments downtown, and until we know what the effect of that will be, we should have a moratorium on building. And I'm shocked that the planning board voted not to go forward with it.
Okay, thanks for your feedback. I don't have any comments right now on that. I can't comment, but I don't even know much about that, so.
No, but the moratorium ends, and you could have another
I
40B tomorrow after it ends. And if you open it and the selectmen support it, I'm sure that there'd be a lot of support at town meeting for that. Thank you.
All right, thanks for your feedback. Anybody else? Come on up.
I just had a follow-up comment.
Sure.
One, do you need my address? Information on that form?
What?
Does she need your
You need her address, or do you have her email?
I don't have anything.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, Jim said he's got your,
On the second, I noticed that there is a vacancy for the MBTA Advisory Board. Has that been filled?
No.
No.
Okay.
Oh, has not, no.
I will be submitting my application.
Excellent.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
Anybody else for open forum? Nope. Okay. Jim, we'll go back to you for
Sure.
a town administrator update.
I have a new business. When we get to it. One quick.
Free cash, just a quick note here, free cash came in certified last week, $6.3 million. Water retained earnings came in at $1,888,000, and sewer retained earnings came in at $2.2 million. Talked about the MBTA crossing, and Finance Committee started meeting last night. Their next meeting is this coming Monday night. They're going to consider some of the citizens' petitions that were submitted, and they're going to start their cycle for the fall
Why don't
town
you say
meeting.
who the new chairman and vice chairman are?
Mark Trudell, who just left, is the chairman.
Congratulations.
Ron Ardeen is the vice chair, and Josette Burke is the clerk and capital budget representative.
Great. Any questions for Jim?
No.
Thank you.
Okay. New business?
New business, I would like to request that we put the vacant seat for the MBTA on our next agenda.
That's fine, it's been advertised
Sure.
for
Yep.
a year now.
Just so that we have notice, so that'll be on the next agenda.
What, to appoint her?
To appoint,
Well,
if,
she's gotta put her
She's gotta put her
right,
on,
but
okay.
if we could just have a placeholder, if there's any appointments to be made that night.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, that would be great.
And we should have affordable housing coming up in September, right? For appointments?
For those
The,
vacant seats.
affordable housing's not the right name of the
Yeah.
committee, but
Yeah.
Walpole Housing
I've gotten-
Partnership.
Walpole Housing Partnership.
Partnership.
Yeah, if you want me to have them all in, or just the specific ones that meet the criteria you're looking for?
Had we voted to?
I thought we were gonna
increase-
talk
We
about
vote-
that.
To increase it by 2?
We voted to increase that board by 2.
Yeah,
And we sort of said what we're looking for is a couple of things, one of which is land use experience. And
right.
maybe somebody who lives in affordable housing, or a couple of areas.
And I do have people that meet those criteria. So do you want just them
I think we
in?
want to look at everyone,
all of them.
all of them, and
I'd be
then,
comfortable looking,
yeah.
seeing all the
There's
resumes.
about, I think, 6 maybe.
Well, if that's the case, should we do like did you wanna do a discussion together instead of?
First.
Yeah, because I feel guilty calling a whole bunch of people in to come in, and if we don't appoint them, if we have already discussed that we have a certain kind of, because then we're just looking at resumes like we do for any other job.
I think I think it'd be more comfortable, two-step process. Have each of them come in, we can interview them publicly, because it's a couple of questions each, which is what we typically have done when we were presented with more candidates than seats to be filled. Then the next meeting after that, perhaps we can just swirl in our minds what we're thinking, and then, instead of having
Okay,
to
so
make
then
it,
if that's the
instead of
case,
it
let
making
them
us.
know that it's like, there'll be no appointments that night.
Okay.
I just think that
Right.
these are a lot of people that are taking a step that they've never taken before.
Mhm.
So to come in and then volunteer, maybe that might be intimidating, and then they don't get picked.
Yeah.
I just think that kind of stinks.
But I don't think we can deliberate on applicants without a public meeting, correct? Like, if there's 6 applicants, we
What-
can't as a board deliberate.
No, we
No,
can't
we-
deliver, no.
but
You
we don't
might
have
see
to
the
do it-
resumes ahead of time.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the 2-step process. If the
I
board would
like
to
the
go that way.
two-step. I just think
Sure.
that people just
So
just
get
so
us
they
the
know who
resumes,
are,
ask them to come
I'll-
in,
I
tell them we're
will
not
s-
gonna make an appointment, and the
Okay.
next meeting we'll make an
All right,
appointment.
what I'll do is I'll scan and email them all to you all
Sure.
again.
That'd be great.
I know I emailed the first batch, but that was a
Right.
while back,
Yeah.
so I'll do that tomorrow. Cause I'm gonna be on vacation next week, so,
Okay.
I'll try to schedule the appointments with these people tomorrow and Thursday, cause I'm out Friday,
Okay,
for the 4th.
great.
Does that sound good?
Yeah,
The first step?
Yeah, because the permutation of 6 applicants to 2 seats, I think would take us much longer than to fly by this,
Yeah,
for me
just-
personally,
a
to
two-step
fly by the
process
seat of
is
my
good.
pants in
Sure.
2 seconds to decide.
Yep.
And then we could maybe
would-
number them, and then that's who we call back. We could do it a number thing. And then how many open seats are there on MBTA? Just the one?
Just the one.
Okay, perfect.
It's just one representative. Yeah, it's always been that way.
Get your application in.
Two, all right.
Yeah.
Am I thinking
Okay.
Norfolk County?
Well,
Am I
Norfolk-
thinking the Aggie?
Well, the Norfolk County is actually one, but we can have an alternate too, so
Okay.
Richard Peeler's.
Is that one, right?
You may be thinking of, what's the other one we've got? We got another one that's got two. Jim's on it, I think he's stuck with paying that person.
Yeah.
MAPC?
Think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other new business?
That's it for me.
Any old business? I'll
That's
take a
all.
motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everybody
you.
on TV.
I think.